Deep in the heart of the Caribbean, where crystal waters meet white sand beaches, a desperate criminal syndicate is about to learn the deadliest lesson of their lives. They chose the wrong target. Sarah Reeves wasn't just another millionaire's wife living in paradise. She was the beloved partner of Commander James Reeves, one of the most lethal Navy SEALs ever to serve. The kidnappers thought they had planned the perfect crime. They had inside information, corrupt police on their payroll, and a foolproof plan to extract millions in ransom money. What they didn't count on was unleashing a force of nature, a man trained in the art of warfare who would tear through their organization with surgical precision. As Sarah fights for survival within their heavily fortified compound, James transforms their tropical paradise into a hunting ground. Each sunset brings new bodies. Each sunrise reveals another decimated safehouse. The criminal empire crumbles as panic spreads through their ranks. They wanted easy money. Instead, they ignited a war with a man who turns their own island against them. This is a story of love pushed to its limits, of paradise turned to hell, and of a husband who will stop at nothing to bring his wife home. The Caribbean underworld is about to discover that there are predators far more dangerous than they ever imagined. Buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The morning sun painted their beachfront estate in shades of gold, casting long shadows across the pristine white sand. Sarah Reeves stood on the balcony of their Caribbean home, sipping coffee while supervising the renovation crew below. The sound of waves mixed with construction noise as workers transformed their already stunning property into something even more magnificent. She lifted her phone, smiling at the familiar face on the screen. James looked tired but happy, his military-sharpened features softened by the way his eyes crinkled when he saw her. Even after 5 years of marriage, those eyes still made her heart skip. "The East Wing is coming along beautifully," Sarah said, turning her phone to show him the progress. "Though I think Manuel might kill me if I changed the tile selection one more time." James chuckled, a sound that always reminded her of their first meeting at that military fundraiser in Washington. "Let him live, honey. We need him to finish before the charity gala next month." Sarah watched a flock of seabirds soar past their property. "When are you coming home? The bed feels too big without you." "2 more days. Just need to finalize this security contract in Miami." James glanced off screen, probably at some document she couldn't see. "Speaking of which, how's Gregory working? Out? He's staying on top of the property security?" Sarah nodded, though something in her stomach twisted at the mention of their head of security. Gregory had been competent enough since James hired him 3 months ago, but lately something felt off about the way he watched her. She brushed the thought aside, not wanting to worry her husband over what was probably nothing. "Everything's fine here. Just miss you." She didn't mention the strange car she'd noticed following her from the market yesterday, or how the regular beach patrols seemed to have gaps in their timing lately. James's expression softened. "Miss you too. Stay safe. I love you. Love you more," Sarah replied, ending the call. She walked back into their bedroom, passing the wall of James's achievements. Combat medals gleamed in their frames alongside photos of him with his SEAL team. Most wives might have found it intimidating, being married to someone with his background, but Sarah had always felt safer knowing what he was capable of. The renovation crew was breaking for lunch when Sarah decided to head into town. She needed to pick up a few things, and the drive always cleared her head. Gregory appeared as she reached her car, all professional efficiency in his crisp security uniform. "Mrs. Reeves, would you like an escort today?" "Not necessary, Gregory. Just a quick run to pick up some supplies." Sarah smiled politely, but something in his returning grin made her skin crawl. The drive into town was beautiful as always, winding coastal roads offering spectacular views of the Caribbean. Sarah kept checking her rearview mirror, noticing a black SUV that seemed to be taking all the same turns. Just paranoia, she told herself, but her hand tightened on the steering wheel. At the market, she moved quickly through her shopping list, all too aware of the eyes that seemed to follow her every move. The island had changed in recent months, tension building beneath its paradise veneer. Even James had mentioned increased criminal activity in the region during their security firm's briefings. Loading her purchases into the car, Sarah's heart nearly stopped when she saw the black SUV parked across the street. 3 men inside, all watching her with an intensity that couldn't be mistaken for anything innocent. She got into her car quickly, hands shaking as she started the engine. The drive home became became a nerve-wracking exercise in control. The SUV maintained its distance, but never disappeared. Sarah's mind raced through James's security protocols. Call the house, alert the guards, get to safe territory. Her phone rang just as she turned onto their private road. Gregory's name flashed on the screen. Relief flooded through her as she answered. Mrs. Reeves, we've got an alert at the main gate. Can you pull over at the security checkpoint? We'll escort you in. Sarah slowed as she approached the checkpoint. But something was wrong. The usual guards weren't at their posts. The gate stood open when it should have been closed. Her instincts screamed danger just as another vehicle appeared, blocking the road ahead. She slammed the car into reverse, but the black SUV was already there, boxing her in. Men in tactical gear emerged from both vehicles. Sarah kicked off her heels, preparing to run, to fight, to do anything but go quietly. The driver's door was yanked open. Sarah caught a glimpse of Gregory's face, twisted in a cruel smile, before something struck her head. The last thing she saw was the paradise. She called home, disappearing as rough hands dragged her into darkness. Hours later, in a Miami conference room, James Reeves felt his world shatter as he watched the video on his phone. Sarah, bound and terrified, while a masked man demanded $10 million. His training kicked in immediately. Years of combat, experience focusing his mind into crystalline clarity. The kidnappers had chosen their target carefully, but they'd made one catastrophic mistake. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They saw only a wealthy businessman, a successful security consultant living in paradise with his beautiful wife. They didn't see the warrior beneath the expensive suit. They hadn't bothered to learn about the man whose military record was partially classified, whose skills had made him legendary, even among the elite SEAL teams. James ended the video and made 2 calls. The first to his old commanding officer, the second to a private number few people possessed. Then he booked the next flight to the Caribbean, his mind already formulating a plan that would dismantle every person involved in taking his wife. The paradise they'd built was about to become a hunting ground, and James Reeves was about to remind the world why he'd been one of the most feared operators in modern military history. James Reeves stood in his home office, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been Gregory's workspace. Files lay scattered across the floor, drawers hung open, and the computer had been stripped to its components. Every piece of evidence pointed to careful planning. Gregory hadn't just betrayed them. He'd spent months preparing for this moment. The ransom video played again on James's phone, each frame burning into his memory. Sarah sat bound to a chair, in what appeared to be a concrete room, her face bruised but her eyes still defiant. The masked man's voice was digitally altered, but the accent beneath the distortion was local. $10 million, 48 hours, no police, no federal agents, no private security. Break these rules and your wife dies. We'll contact you with delivery instructions. James paused the video, focusing on the background details. The kidnappers had been careful to show nothing distinctive, but they'd made mistakes. There was a partial shipping manifest visible on a crate, and the particular shade of the concrete walls suggested recent construction. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from the local police chief. James let it ring. He'd already discovered the depth of corruption in local law enforcement during his initial calls. The chief's bank records showed regular payments from offshore accounts linked to known criminal enterprises. The door opened and Marcus Chen entered. The former Delta Force operator had been on the first flight from Miami after James's call. Now he surveyed the office with the same tactical precision that had made him one of the military's top intelligence specialists. Your security system was compromised 3 months ago, Marcus said, holding up a small device. They've had eyes and ears on everything since Gregory installed this. Teams sweeping the rest of the house now. James nodded, his mind already processing the implications. Gregory's files, mostly deleted, but we're recovering what we can. Preliminary data suggests connections to the Morales cartel. They've been expanding their operations in the Caribbean, using legitimate businesses as fronts. The name triggered something in James's memory. His security firm had recently blocked the cartel's attempt to acquire several properties near major ports. The kidnapping wasn't just about ransom, it was retaliation. Another operative appeared in the doorway, this one carrying a laptop. Sir, we found something in the backup server. Gregory made contact with a known cartel facilitator 2 weeks before you hired him. James moved to the window, watching as more members of his quickly assembled team established a perimeter around the property. All former special operations, all men he he'd served with or vetted personally. No official agencies, no paper trail, no one who could be compromised. What do we know about their compound locations? Marcus pulled up a satellite map on his tablet. 3 confirmed sites on the main island, 2 more on the smaller ones, all heavily guarded, all with deep water access. They're running something bigger than just kidnapping. The pieces were falling into place. James had seen similar operations during his SEAL days. The cartel was using the islands as a transit point, probably for both drugs and human trafficking. Sarah's kidnapping was meant to force his security firm out of the region, clearing the way for their expansion. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number, coordinates for the ransom drop, along with a warning that any attempt to track or follow the money would result in Sarah's death. "They'll kill her even if we pay," James said, his voice cold. "They can't afford to leave witnesses, not with what she might have seen." Marcus nodded grimly. "What's the play?" "We start with their lowest level operators, work our way up the chain. I want every member of their organization looking over their shoulder, wondering if they're next. Fear will make them sloppy." The team gathered around as James outlined his strategy. They would strike simultaneously at multiple locations, disrupting the cartel's operations while gathering intelligence on Sarah's location. Each target would be eliminated with precision, leaving no doubt about the professional nature of the attacks. "What about Gregory?" James pulled up the tracking data from Gregory's phone. The traitor was moving between locations, probably coordinating with his new employers. "He's mine, but first, we need to make sure Sarah's alive." As if in response, another video arrived. This one showed Sarah being moved to a new location, proof of life for the ransom negotiation. James studied every frame, noting details others might miss. The sound of waves in the background, the particular type of bird call, the way the sunlight angle hit the walls. "Eastern side of the main island," he said. "Within 2 miles of the new resort construction." Marcus checked his own. "Data matches our intel. Cartel bought that land through a shell company last year. Satellite shows significant underground structures." James began loading weapons from his personal armory, each piece selected with careful consideration. "We move in teams of 2. Marcus, coordinate with our offshore assets. I want eyes on every possible escape route. If they try to move her by boat, I want to know about it." The sun was setting over the Caribbean, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. James watched from the balcony where he'd last seen Sarah's face on his phone screen. The paradise they'd built here had been an illusion, a thin veneer over the darkness that had always lurked beneath the surface. His team was in position, each operator prepared to begin systematically dismantling the cartel's operation. They would strike first at the drug warehouses, then the smuggling routes, and finally the leadership. Each action precisely calculated to create maximum disruption with minimal collateral damage. James checked his watch as the last light faded from the sky. In less than 48 hours, the kidnappers expected him to deliver $10 million. Instead, he would deliver something very different, a message written in a language they would understand all too well. The first target was a small processing facility near the marina. James moved through the darkness like a ghost, years of training evident in every silent step. The guards never saw him coming. Within minutes, the building was secured, its occupants eliminated with surgical precision. Evidence gathered from the facility confirmed their intelligence about the larger operation. The cartel had extensive infrastructure on the islands, all of it vulnerable to someone with James's particular set of skills. As he prepared to move to the next target, James received another message from the kidnappers, a photo of Sarah, along with more demands, but something in the image caught his attention. She'd managed to position her hands in a way that would seem natural to her captors, but conveyed a clear message to anyone with military training. James allowed himself a grim smile. His wife was still fighting, still gathering intelligence, still refusing to be just a victim. The kidnappers had no idea what they'd started when they chose to target her. He signaled his team to begin the next phase of operations. Across the islands, highly trained operators moved into position. The night was just beginning, and by dawn, the cartel would understand exactly what kind of war they'd initiated. Paradise was about to become their nightmare. Sarah watched her captors through half-closed eyes, memorizing faces and routines. The concrete room was part of a larger compound. That much she'd gathered from the echoing footsteps and muffled conversations. Her military spouse training, something James had insisted upon, was paying off in unexpected ways. noise. The guard by the door shifted nervously, checking his phone for the 100th time. Something had spooked them. The usual arrogant swagger had been replaced by tense whispers and worried glances. Sarah hid her smile. She knew exactly what was causing their fear. In another part of the island, James Reeves methodically cleaned his blade. The body at his feet had belonged to one of the cartel's top lieutenants until moments ago. The man had lasted longer than most under interrogation, but eventually he'd provided the information James needed about the trafficking operation. Marcus appeared silently at his side, tablet in hand. 6 more locations confirmed. They're moving product through the abandoned sugar refineries. James studied the map, noting how the cartel had positioned their operations away from tourist areas. Human trafficking? At least 30 victims being held for transport, mostly young women from South America. They're using the same routes for drugs and people. The revelation crystallized something in James's mind. The cartel wasn't just keeping Sarah as leverage for ransom. They were sizing up their operation, probably planning to add her to their trafficking network once they had their money. His next target was a safe house near the marina. The approach was complicated by security cameras and motion sensors, but nothing he hadn't defeated before. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements predictable and sloppy. Inside the safe house, Sarah worked at the ropes binding her wrists. Her captors had grown careless, failing to check her restraints as frequently as they should. A small piece of metal stripped from her watch was proving to be an effective tool. She could hear arguing from the next room, something about missing shipments and dead men. One voice she recognized as Gregory's, strain evident in his tone. "We need to move her now, he's getting too close." A different voice responded with quiet menace. "We move when I say we move. Your former boss is good, but he's just one man. My people will handle him." Sarah suppressed a laugh. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. James wasn't just good. He was a legend even among special operations forces. She'd heard the stories from his former teammates, seen the classified medals in their vault. The ropes finally gave way, just as an explosion rocked the compound. Alarm bells screamed as guards rushed past her door. Sarah waited, counting seconds, then slipped into the corridor. The emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. She made it 3 hallways before running into resistance. 2 guards, both surprised to see her free. Sarah used their moment of shock to strike, employing the close combat techniques James had drilled into her. The first guard went down hard. The second managed to grab her, but a knee to the groin, followed by an elbow to the throat, ended the fight. More explosions echoed through the compound. Sarah oriented herself based on the sounds of the ocean she'd been tracking. The exit had to be east, toward the water. She moved carefully, using the chaos as cover. Meanwhile, James systematically worked his way through the safe house. Each room cleared with precise efficiency, each enemy eliminated without wasted motion. The intel they gathered pointed to a massive operation, far larger than initial estimates. Marcus coordinated the simultaneous strikes on other cartel holdings. Weapons caches, drug storage, and transportation hubs all went up in flames. The message was clear. Nowhere was safe. In the main compound, Sarah found herself in what appeared to be a processing center. Rows of young women sat chained to tables, sorting white powder into packages. Their faces showed a mixture of fear and hope as she appeared. "Please," one woman whispered in Spanish, "help us." Sarah searched the guard she'd disabled, finding keys. As she freed the women, she realized the full scope of what she'd discovered. This wasn't just about her kidnapping. The cartel was running an international trafficking operation through these islands. The sound of gunfire grew closer. Sarah organized the women quickly, using her limited Spanish to convey instructions. They moved as a group, staying low and be quiet. She tried not to think about how many of them might not make it. James received the update from his team about movement at the compound. Multiple heat signatures heading toward the water. His heart rate didn't change as he efficiently dispatched the last safehouse guard. Sarah was alive and fighting. He'd expected nothing less from his wife. The cartel's response was predictable. More men, more guns, thrown at the problem in hopes of overwhelming their hunter. They hadn't learned that quantity meant nothing against quality. James moved like a shadow through their defenses, each strike calculated for maximum effect. Gregory proved harder to find. The traitor had gone to ground, probably hoping to slip away in the chaos, but James had planned for this, had containment. Teams positioned at every possible escape route. Sarah led her group toward the sound of boats. If she was right, there would be transportation waiting. The cartel wouldn't risk losing their product without an escape plan. The women followed silently, years of abuse having taught them the value of quiet. They encountered resistance at the dock. 3 guards, well-armed and professional. Sarah used hand signals to position the women in cover, then engaged the guards herself. The training paid off again as she moved from target to target, each strike precise and devastating. The last guard managed to radio for help before she took him down. Sarah knew their window of opportunity was closing. She quickly loaded the women into the largest boat, thanking God for the sailing lessons James had insisted she take. As the boat pulled away from the dock, Sarah saw figures emerging from the compound. More guards, and with them a face she recognized. The cartel boss himself, rage evident even at this distance. His shouts carried across the water, promising revenge. James arrived at the compound just as the boat disappeared into the darkness. The scene told its own story. Dead guards, signs of skilled hand-to-hand combat, and a group of escaped trafficking victims. Pride mixed with concern as he realized what Sarah had done. The cartel boss was already organizing pursuit boats when James's team struck. Precision fire from multiple angles eliminated the leadership in seconds. Those who survived the initial assault found themselves facing an opponent who moved with mechanical efficiency through their ranks. In the aftermath, James found Gregory hiding in a storage container. The traitor babbled promises and pleas, offering information in exchange for mercy. James listened carefully, extracting every useful detail before delivering justice. Sarah navigated through the dark waters, using the stars for guidance, just as James had taught her. The women huddled together, whispering prayers of thanks. She knew they weren't safe yet. The cartel would have other boats, other compounds, but something had changed. The predators had become prey, their operation exposed and vulnerable. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she pointed the boat towards safer waters. James would find her. He always did. In the compound's command center, James accessed the cartel's computer systems. The trafficking operation's full scope became clear. Routes, contacts, corrupt officials, all laid bare. Everything needed to dismantle their entire enterprise. He sent the data to Marcus for distribution to trusted authorities, keeping copies as insurance. Then he began preparing for the next phase. The cartel was wounded but not destroyed. They would regroup, seek revenge, try to salvage what they could. James cleaned his weapons methodically, mind already mapping out the coming battles. They had chosen this war, thinking themselves apex predators in their island paradise. Now they would learn what real predators were capable of. The hunt was far from over. Sarah guided the boat through the dark waters, every sense alert for pursuit. The women she'd rescued remained quiet, their eyes scanning the horizon for threats. The sound of distant explosions echoed across the water, evidence of James's continued assault on the cartel's operations. The island's police boats would be searching for them soon, if they weren't already. Sarah had seen enough evidence of corruption to know she couldn't trust the authorities. She needed a safe harbor, somewhere to protect these women until proper help could arrive. Her mind raced through options, remembering details from James's security briefings. There was a small cove on the northern side of the neighboring island, difficult to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. Local fishermen used it to shelter during storms. At the compound, James methodically worked his way through the cartel's records. Each file revealed new layers of corruption, stretching from local officials all the way to mainland power brokers. The trafficking operation was just one part of a larger criminal enterprise. Marcus coordinated their teams across multiple islands, striking at every location mentioned in the files. Warehouses burned, shipments were seized, and the cartel's carefully constructed infrastructure began to crumble. The cartel's response was swift but disorganized. Years of operating with impunity had made them complacent. They weren't prepared for an opponent who combined military precision with intimate knowledge of their territory. In a luxury villa overlooking the ocean, Ramon Morales watched his empire burn. The cartel boss had built his organization through a combination of brutality and business acumen, carefully maintaining a veneer of legitimacy. Now that veneer was being stripped away piece by piece. "Find them," he ordered his lieutenants. "I want the woman recaptured and her husband's head on my desk." But his men were already already discovering the difficulty of that task. 3 more teams had gone silent in the past hour. Those who did report back spoke of an enemy who seemed to anticipate their every move, who struck from the shadows and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Sarah reached the cove just as dawn began to paint the sky. She guided the boat into a natural cavern, hidden from aerial surveillance. The women helped each other onto a narrow beach, their movements showing a mix of exhaustion and desperate hope. "We'll be safe here," Sarah assured them in Spanish, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. She knew James would be looking for her, but she also knew he would be methodical, making sure each step was secure before proceeding. Back on the main island, James received confirmation that Gregory's body had been found by local police. So, Traitor's death would be blamed on cartel infighting, adding to the chaos. More importantly, Gregory's phone contained a complete record of his communications with the organization. "They're running scared," Marcus reported, showing satellite imagery of boats leaving various ports. "But some of the smarter ones are digging in, fortifying key locations." James studied the tactical display, noting patterns in the enemy movements. The cartel was following predictable protocols, falling back to defensive positions they believed were secret. Each retreat provided more intelligence, more targets for his teams to strike. Sarah organized the rescued women into watch shifts, making sure everyone got some rest while maintaining security. She treated injuries as best she could with limited supplies, listening to their stories of capture and abuse. Each tale strengthened her resolve to see the cartel destroyed. One of the younger women, Maria, proved particularly helpful. She'd been forced to work as a secretary in the compound, giving her insight into the organization's structure. Sarah carefully noted every detail, knowing each piece of information could help James dismantle the operation. Morales received reports of more losses throughout the morning. Shipments seized, safe houses compromised, key personnel eliminated. His remaining lieutenants argued for different strategies, some wanting to abandon the islands entirely, others calling for all-out war. The cartel boss knew better. This wasn't a war they could win through conventional means. Their opponent was too skilled, too determined. They needed leverage, something to force him to back off. "Find his contacts," Morales ordered. "Everyone. He cares about everyone he's ever worked with. Make him understand the price of continuing this fight." But the cartel's attempts at investigation hit another wall. James had been thorough in protecting his connections, using multiple layers of security and false identities. Those few leads they did uncover led to more ambushes, more losses. Sarah's group received their first visitors late in the afternoon. Local fishermen, drawn to the cove by their regular routine, were surprised to find it occupied. Sarah tensed, prepared for conflict, but the fishermen's reaction to seeing the rescued women told her everything she needed to know. "We've seen the boats," one fisherman said in broken English. "Bad men looking everywhere. We help you hide." The fishermen brought food and fresh water, sharing what they could spare. More importantly, they brought news of the cartel's deteriorating position. James's campaign had thrown the entire island into chaos, with criminal enterprises turning on each other in panic. James monitored the police band frequencies, tracking the official response to his actions. Most local authorities were laying low, unwilling to risk confrontation. Those who did venture out found themselves dealing with an increasingly unstable situation. The cartel's attempts at counterattacks grew more desperate. Car bombs, drive-by shootings, anything to create terror and confusion. But each incident only served to further expose their operations, giving James's team more targets. Marcus coordinated with trusted federal contacts, making sure evidence of corruption reached the right people. The cartel's political protection began to erode as officials scrambled to distance themselves from the organization. Sarah kept her group moving within the cave system, never staying in one place too long. The fishermen helped establish a warning system, using their regular activities as cover for monitoring cartel movements. More refugees arrived as word spread through underground networks. Other trafficking victims who had escaped in the chaos, local people who had suffered under cartel control. Sarah found herself running a growing resistance movement. James received the first messages from Sarah through the fishermen's network. Brief communications encoded using their private system, confirming her safety and providing intelligence about cartel operations. James, his pride in her capabilities mixed with concern for the risks she was taking. Morales watched his organization continue to fracture. Lower-level members fled or switched allegiances, seeking protection from rival groups. Those who remained loyal grew increasingly paranoid, seeing threats in every shadow. The cartel boss knew he needed to change tactics. Direct confrontation wasn't working. He began planning a more subtle approach, something to draw his enemies out into the open. Sarah intercepted partial communications about the cartel's new strategy through her growing network of informants. She recognized the pattern from her years working with James's security firm. They were shifting to psychological warfare. The first attacks targeted civilian infrastructure, power outages, water supply disruptions, anything to create public pressure for a return to normalcy. The cartel hoped to turn the population against the forces destroying their criminal empire, but the plan backfired. Years of resentment toward cartel control bubbled to the surface. Each act of desperation only served to turn more locals against them, providing James with more allies and intelligence sources. Sarah's refugee group grew more organized, establishing secure supply lines and communication networks. The fishermen's community became a vital link, their legitimate activities providing cover for resistance operations. James systematically eliminated cartel facilities working from the outside in. Each strike further compressed their territory, forcing them into an increasingly narrow space with fewer options for escape. The noose was tightening, but both James and Sarah knew the most dangerous phase was still to come. Cornered predators were unpredictable, and the cartel still had resources to draw upon. The paradise they had once known was forever changed, transformed into a battlefield where the line between peaceful civilian and active combatant blurred with each passing day. The only certainty was that there could be no return to the way things were before. The hunt would continue until one side or the other was completely destroyed. The morning sun cast long shadows through the governor's office as James presented his evidence. Photos, financial records, and surveillance footage spread across the mahogany desk, telling a story of corruption that reached the highest levels of island government. Governor Martinez studied the documents with growing unease. His connections to the cartel had seemed secure, protected by layers of intermediaries and plausible deniability. Now those layers were being peeled away with surgical precision. "What do you want?" The governor's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. James remained standing, his presence filling the room with coiled tension. "Your resignation, effective immediately. A full confession of your role in the trafficking operation. Names of every official you've compromised." In the cave network, Sarah received word of the meeting through her growing web of informants. The resistance movement had evolved beyond simple survival, becoming an intelligence-gathering operation that rivaled the cartel's former network. Maria brought the latest reports from their coastal observers. 3 more boats left during the night. High-ranking members trying to escape with whatever they can carry. Sarah marked the locations on their makeshift map, noting patterns in the evacuation routes. Each piece of intelligence was transmitted to James through their coded system, helping him tighten the noose around the remaining cartel leadership. Ramon Morales paced in his fortified compound, watching surveillance feeds from multiple locations. His organization was bleeding out, hemorrhaging men and resources faster than he could replace them. Even his most loyal lieutenants were beginning to question his leadership. They found the offshore accounts, his financial advisor reported, voice shaking. "Everything we moved through the Caymans, gone. The European connections are cutting ties." The cartel boss smashed his fist into the wall, pain focusing his rage. Years of careful building, of cultivating the right connections and eliminating rivals, all undone by one man's relentless vendetta. James coordinated with Marcus. As their teams moved into position around key government buildings, the governor's confession had triggered a cascade of revelations, each corrupt official scrambling to save themselves by exposing exposing others. "Police chief just rolled over," Marcus reported. "Gave up everything. Station commanders, patrol routes, safe house locations. They're all running scared." The systematic dismantling of the island's corrupt power structure created a vacuum that threatened to destabilize the entire region. James had anticipated this, working with federal authorities to ensure legitimate replacements were ready to step in. Sarah's resistance group expanded their operation, providing safe passage for witnesses willing to testify against the cartel. Each successful evacuation strengthened their reputation, bringing more defectors and informants to their cause. The cave network became a symbol of hope for those who had suffered under cartel control. Former victims worked alongside local volunteers, transforming their trauma into purpose as they helped others escape. Morales watched his options narrow with each passing hour. Traditional escape routes were compromised, loyal assets eliminated or turned. Even his personal security team showed signs of wavering, their faith in his invincibility shattered by recent events. The cartel boss made his decision. If he couldn't maintain control through power and fear, he would burn everything down. Better to destroy it all than let someone else take what he had built. Orders went out to his remaining forces. Targeted bombings, assassinations, anything to create maximum chaos. The Paradise Islands would become a war zone, forcing authorities to focus on civilian casualties instead of pursuing him. Sarah intercepted the first hints of the new strategy through their intelligence network. The pattern was clear, matching tactics she'd studied during her years working with James's security firm. "They're going to target infrastructure," she told her core team. "Ports, power plants, water treatment facilities, anything that will create panic and overwhelm emergency services." James received Sarah's warning, just as his own analysis reached the same conclusion. The cartel's desperation made them predictable, falling back on scorched earth tactics he'd seen before in other conflict zones. Teams were redirected to protect critical facilities, working with local authorities who could still be trusted. Each potential target was hardened against attack, forcing the cartel to expend resources on increasingly difficult operations. Governor Martinez's confession aired on local television, his detailed account of corruption shocking even those who had suspected the truth. The carefully maintained facade of legitimate business interests crumbled, exposing the criminal enterprise. Beneath, Sarah watched the broadcast with her refugees, seeing hope replace fear in their eyes as justice finally reached those who had seemed untouchable. The women she'd rescued were no longer victims but warriors in their own right, each contributing to the resistance in their own way. Morales received confirmation that his first wave of attacks had been thwarted. Somehow his enemies had anticipated every target, positioned defenders exactly where they were needed. The failure sparked a paranoid rage that sent him deeper into isolation. James moved his operations into the final phase, coordinating with federal authorities for the endgame. The cartel's remaining strongholds were identified, their defenses mapped and contingencies planned. The noose drew tighter as more officials confessed, each revelation exposing new layers of corruption. Bank records, property titles, shell companies, all carefully documented evidence of criminal enterprise spanning decades. Sarah's network provided crucial intelligence about cartel movements, identifying escape routes and safe houses that might have been overlooked. The resistance fighters proved invaluable, their knowledge of local terrain and community connections filling gaps in official information. The Paradise Islands transformed day by day, corruption burned away by the heat of justice and revenge. But the cost was evident in burned buildings, shattered lives, and the growing list of casualties from both sides. James felt the weight of each death, necessary or not. The tactical calculations came easily, years of training taking over in combat situations. But the human cost, the collateral damage to innocent lives, that burden grew heavier with each passing day. Sarah struggled with similar concerns as she managed her growing refugee population. Each new arrival brought stories of loss and trauma, reminders of the pain that had been hidden beneath the surface of their tropical paradise. The resistance fighters learned to balance compassion with necessity, providing support for victims while maintaining operational security. Their cave network expanded, connecting with other hidden communities that had survived under cartel control. Morales watched his empire crumble through surveillance feeds, paranoia growing with each betrayal. Trusted lieutenants disappeared or switched sides, leaving him increasingly isolated in his fortified fortified compound. The cartel boss reviewed his remaining options, each less appealing than the last. His organization's strength had always been in its network of corruption and fear. With those advantages stripped away, he was just another criminal hiding from justice. James received confirmation that federal authorities were ready to move. Task forces positioned around the islands, waiting for his signal to begin the final operation. Everything was in place for a coordinated strike that would eliminate the last pockets of cartel resistance. Sarah prepared her people for the coming conflict, knowing the cartel would fight hardest when cornered. The resistance fighters took up defensive positions, ready to protect their refugees and support the official operation. The paradise they had known was gone, transformed by violence and revelation, but something new was emerging from the chaos, something built on truth and justice rather than corruption and fear. The final battle approached, and with it, the chance to reclaim their islands from those who had poisoned them for so long. The transfer of Sarah to the cartel's main compound happened under cover of darkness. Armed guards moved in precise formations, their nervousness evident in quick glances and tightened grips on weapons. They had seen what happened to their colleagues at other locations, how an invisible predator systematically destroyed their operations. Inside the compound's control room, Ramon Morales watched the security feeds with growing agitation. Moving the hostage was a risk, but keeping her in less secure locations had proven fatal for his men. The main compound offered better protection, multiple layers of security, and direct access to escape routes if needed. Sarah memorized every detail of the transfer, counting steps and noting security patterns. Her hands remained bound, but her mind worked freely, mapping the facility's layout. The guards' tension told her that James's campaign was succeeding, breaking down their confidence and organization. James received word of the transfer through his network of informants. The main compound had been his ultimate target from the beginning, a fortress built into the island's northern cliffs. Now Sarah was inside, adding personal stakes to an already complex operation. Marcus coordinated their surveillance teams, gathering real-time intelligence on the compound's defenses. They've doubled the guard rotations, added sensors to the perimeter. They're expecting us to make a move. The compound's design reflected years of paranoid planning. Multiple escape tunnels, hardened communication systems, and enough supplies to withstand a prolonged siege. Morales had built his headquarters to survive any conventional assault. Sarah was housed in a specially prepared cell, one with clear lines of sight from multiple security cameras. The guards maintained constant surveillance, watching for any sign of the escape attempts that had become her trademark. "Your husband is impressive," Morales said during one of his visits to her cell, "but he's fighting a losing battle. Even if he kills every one of my men, the organization will survive. Others will take my place." James studied the compound's blueprints, obtained through a combination of hacked building permits and insider information. The official plans showed standard security measures, but thermal imaging revealed hidden structures and power sources that suggested more elaborate defenses. The psychological impact of their campaign became evident in the cartel's communications. Intercepted messages showed growing paranoia, with commanders suspecting betrayal from their own men. Each successful strike increased the pressure, forcing them to commit more resources to defense. Sarah worked to amplify that paranoia, dropping subtle hints during guard changes about informants in their ranks. The seeds of doubt grew quickly in soil, already prepared by fear and uncertainty. Maria, now operating as Sarah's primary intelligence contact in the resistance, coordinated with local fishermen to monitor boat traffic around the compound. Any attempt at evacuation by sea would be spotted and reported through their network. James positioned his teams strategically, cutting off potential escape routes while maintaining the illusion of multiple threats. The cartel's defenders spread themselves thin, trying to cover every possible angle of attack. Morales received reports of more defections, his organization hemorrhaging members faster than he could replace them. Those who remained grew increasingly unstable, jumping at shadows and seeing threats in every unexpected movement. The compound security systems registered multiple phantom alerts, sensors triggered by weather or wildlife. Each false alarm forced a response, exhausting the guards and creating patterns that James's team carefully documented. halted. Sarah noticed the declining quality of her meals, supplies running low as external supply lines were cut. The guards spoke in whispers about shortages, about communications breaking down with their support network. James coordinated with federal authorities, ensuring that official response teams would be ready when needed. The operation had grown beyond simple revenge, becoming a full-scale effort to eliminate one of the region's most powerful criminal enterprises. The resistance movement expanded their intelligence gathering, with Maria's network providing crucial information about cartel movements and vulnerabilities. Each piece of data was verified and transmitted through secure channels to James's team. Morales watched his empire crumble through security feeds, each screen showing another aspect of his organization's decline. Warehouses stood empty, shipping routes were compromised, and his once loyal soldiers deserted in growing numbers. Sarah's cell became a focal point of activity, guards rotating frequently as paranoia about escape attempts grew. She used their fear to her advantage, studying each new team for weaknesses that could be exploited. The compound's power systems showed signs of strain as backup generators took over from compromised main lines. Security measures designed for short-term emergencies were forced into extended operation, creating new vulnerabilities. James's teams systematically eliminated external support structures, isolating the compound from potential reinforcement. Supply convoys were intercepted, communication lines cut, and escape routes blocked one by one. Morales felt the noose tightening, his options narrowing with each passing hour. The compound designed as his fortress was becoming his prison, its defenses as effective at keeping him in as keeping others out. Sarah maintained her role as a focal point for the guards' anxiety, her previous escapes making them hypersensitive to any movement or sound from her cell. The psychological strain began showing in missed checks and sloppy procedures. The resistance fighters provided crucial support, their knowledge of local terrain allowing them to spot and report cartel movements that might have gone unnoticed. Each piece of intelligence brought James closer to his final assault. Inside the compound, supplies continued to dwindle as external sources were cut off. Guards began rationing ammunition, fuel reserves ran low, and communication systems operated on reduced power to conserve energy. James received confirmation that all elements were in position for the final phase. Federal response teams waited. Offshore, resistance fighters monitored escape routes, and his own operators were ready to breach the compound's defenses. Sarah sensed the changing atmosphere, noting increased tension in the guards and hearing fragments of worried conversations. The compound's facade of impregnable security was cracking, revealing the fear beneath. Morales called his remaining lieutenants together, seeking solutions but finding only frightened men looking for escape. The organization that had once ruled through fear now found itself consumed by it. The compound's defenses remained formidable, but James had spent weeks identifying and exploiting weaknesses. Each security measure had its flaw, each defense its blind spot, waiting to be used against its creators. The Paradise Islands held their breath, waiting for the final confrontation between a vengeful husband and a cornered cartel boss. The outcome would determine not just Sarah's fate, but the future of the entire region. The hunt was approaching its climax, and both predator and prey knew that only one would survive the coming storm. The cartel reached its breaking point on a moonless night when the compound's generators finally failed. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows through corridors as backup systems struggled to maintain critical security functions. Sarah felt the change immediately. The constant hum of surveillance equipment died, replaced by the sound of panicked voices and running feet. Guards abandoned their posts, drawn to more pressing concerns than watching a single hostage. Morales raged through the command center, demanding updates from increasingly frightened subordinates. The compound's sophisticated defense systems, dependent on steady power, began failing one by one. Motion sensors went dark, communication networks crashed, and automated locks reverted to manual operation. James watched the chaos unfold through thermal imaging, his teams positioned around the compound compound's perimeter. The power failure wasn't an accident, but rather the culmination of weeks of systematic sabotage by resistance fighters who had infiltrated. Maintenance crews. Marcus coordinated their final approach, each operator moving with practiced precision. Multiple heat signatures moving toward the escape tunnels. They're starting to run. Inside her cell, Sarah worked quickly to exploit the confusion. The electronic locks had failed, leaving only simple mechanical backups that proved little challenge to her practiced hands. The skills James had insisted she learn were paying off. Morales ordered his remaining forces to defensive positions, but fear had already broken their discipline. Men who had once ruled the islands through terror now found themselves trapped, their fortress becoming their prison. The first breaches came simultaneously from multiple points. James's teams moved like ghosts through the darkened corridors, eliminating resistance with surgical precision. Each operator knew their role, had memorized their targets and routes through weeks of preparation. Sarah moved through the compound with equal purpose, heading not toward escape, but deeper into the facility. Her time in captivity had given her intimate knowledge of the layout, including locations of vital intelligence that could dismantle what remained of the cartel's network. The resistance fighters maintained their perimeter, ensuring no one slipped, through the net being drawn tight around the compound. Maria coordinated their efforts from a hidden command post, relaying information about attempted escapes to both James's teams and federal authorities waiting offshore. Morales watched his security feeds fail one by one, each black screen representing another section of his fortress lost to the invisible attackers. His remaining lieutenants urged retreat through the escape tunnels, but paranoia kept him rooted in place. Every shadow could hide a traitor, every sound could signal his death. James moved methodically through the compound, each step bringing him closer to both his wife and his target. The night vision equipment revealed bodies of cartel members who had turned on each other in panic, proving that fear could be as deadly as any weapon. Sarah found the records room exactly where she expected, guarded by a single terrified clerk who surrendered immediately. The documents inside would provide evidence needed to prosecute corrupt officials across multiple jurisdictions, dismantling the legal framework that had protected the cartel's operations. The compound's defenders broke completely when the first explosions rocked the upper levels. Carefully placed charges cut off access to escape routes, forcing the remaining cartel members back toward the central security zone. Morales felt his control slipping away as more guards fled or surrendered. The organization he had built through decades of violence and intimidation was collapsing around him, destroyed by an enemy he had fatally underestimated. James encountered increased resistance as he approached the command center, dealing with the few truly loyal soldiers who remained. These were the dangerous ones, men with nothing left to lose and no hope of escape. Sarah secured the intelligence, materials, and began working her way toward the rendezvous point she knew James would have planned. Her movement through the compound was aided by the chaos, with most surviving guards too focused on their own survival to notice her. The resistance fighters reported multiple attempted breakouts, all contained with minimal casualties. The cordon around the compound held firm, supported by federal agents who had positioned themselves to intercept any escapees. Morales received confirmation that all escape routes were compromised. His security chief reported federal vessels blocking sea access, while resistance fighters controlled the land approaches. The trap was complete. James reached the command center's outer perimeter, finding signs of recent fighting among the cartel's own forces. The psychological pressure had done its work, turning the defenders against each other in their final hours. Sarah encountered a group of hostages held in a secure wing, women who had been kept as insurance against exactly this type of assault. She quickly organized their evacuation, using her knowledge of the compound's layout to guide them towards safety. The resistance movement's intelligence network provided continuous updates on the situation, allowing James's teams to adjust their approach as the scenario evolved. Each piece of information helped tighten the noose around the remaining cartel leadership. Morales made his final stand in the command center, surrounded by banks of dead monitors and the few few guards who remained loyal. His empire had crumbled in weeks, destroyed by a single man's vendetta and his own fatal miscalculation. The compound that had once symbolized the cartel's power became the site of its destruction as James's carefully planned operation reached its climax. The hunters had become the hunted, paradise had become a battleground, and justice finally caught up with those who had thought themselves above it. Sarah's mission to secure vital intelligence succeeded just as the final assault began, ensuring that the cartel's destruction would be complete and permanent. The evidence she gathered would reach far beyond the islands, exposing corruption at every level. The resistance fighters maintained their positions until federal authorities confirmed total containment of the facility. Their role in dismantling the cartel's operations would remain largely unknown, but their impact would be felt for generations. James approached his final target methodically, knowing that cornered predators were the most dangerous. The skills that had made him legendary among special forces would face their ultimate test in the coming confrontation. The Paradise Islands held their breath as the operation reached its conclusion, waiting to see what would emerge from the ashes of this conflict. The cartel's reign of terror was ending, but the cost of victory remained to be determined. The hunt had changed everyone involved, transforming victims into warriors and paradise into a battlefield. As the final confrontation approached, both hunters and hunted prepared for an ending that would reshape the region forever. The tropical storm intensified as James approached the command center, rain lashing against the compound's walls. The weather provided perfect cover, masking the sound of his movement through the darkened corridors. Sarah guided the rescued hostages through maintenance tunnels, their progress monitored by resistance fighters who had mapped every possible escape route. The women moved silently, their fear of recapture overcome by the promise of freedom. Inside the command center, Morales watched his last defenses crumble. The few loyal guards remaining positioned themselves around the room, weapons trained on entry points. Their hands shook despite years of experience, the legend of their pursuer growing with each passing minute. Marcus coordinated the final phase. From his position outside, tracking heat signatures through the compound's walls. Target confirmed in primary control room, minimal resistance remaining, all escape routes sealed. The resistance fighters maintained their cordon despite the worsening weather, their determination strengthened by years of suffering under cartel control. Maria's network provided constant updates on attempted breaches, each one contained and neutralized. James navigated through the compound's security measures with practiced ease, his knowledge of the facility enhanced by weeks of surveillance and intelligence gathering. The skills honed through countless missions served him perfectly in these final moments. Sarah secured the intelligence materials in a waterproof case, ensuring that evidence of the cartel's operations would survive regardless of what happened next. The documents represented years of criminal enterprise, enough to prosecute dozens of corrupt officials. The storm's intensity matched the chaos inside the compound, with thunder masking the sound of sporadic gunfire as the last pockets of resistance were eliminated. Lightning illuminated corridors filled with signs of desperate fighting. Morales felt the noose tightening as reports ceased from his outer defenses. The command center's reinforced walls offered little comfort now, transformed from protection into a trap by his enemy's methodical approach. Federal authorities maintained their positions offshore, monitoring all possible maritime escape routes. The task force commander watched thermal imaging displays, tracking the systematic elimination of cartel forces. James encountered the first real resistance near the command center's entrance. 3 guards, more professional than the others, had established an effective defensive position. The resulting confrontation was brief but intense. Sarah reached her designated extraction point, ensuring the rescued hostages were safely transferred to resistance fighters. Her own mission wasn't finished, knowing critical intelligence remained in the compound's secure areas. The storm reached its peak as James breached the command center's outer security, wind and rain penetrating the compound through battle damage. Emergency Emergency lighting cast shifting shadows that added to the defenders' growing panic. Morales ordered his remaining men to final defensive positions, their loyalty purchased with promises of wealth and power now worthless. The cartel boss clutched a satellite phone, desperately trying to contact external resources that no longer existed. Maria coordinated with federal forces as the operation entered its final phase, resistance fighters ensuring no target escaped in the confusion. Their knowledge of local terrain proved invaluable as the storm complicated surveillance efforts. James moved through the command center's auxiliary rooms, eliminating resistance with practiced efficiency. Each engagement brought him closer to his target, the man responsible for turning Paradise into a battleground. Sarah accessed secondary command posts, gathering additional intelligence while avoiding the final confrontation. Her role in dismantling the cartel would extend beyond this single night, ensuring its influence was permanently destroyed. The compound's power systems failed completely as lightning struck nearby transformers. Backup generators, already strained by weeks of irregular maintenance, surrendered to entropy. Darkness claimed the facility's remaining active sectors. Morales watched his last security feeds die, leaving him dependent on direct observation. The legendary cartel boss found himself reduced to peering into shadows, jumping at every sound. Carried by the storm, federal vessels maintained position despite deteriorating conditions, their crews prepared to intercept any waterborne escape attempts. Thermal imaging showed the steady progress of James's assault, targeting areas of remaining resistance. James reached the command center's inner sanctum as thunder shook the compound's foundations. His approach had been calculated to maximize psychological impact, allowing fear to erode the defenders' resolve before physical confrontation. Sarah secured final evidence caches, ensuring nothing vital would be lost in the coming conflict. Her actions would have long-lasting implications for criminal enterprises throughout the region, far beyond this single operation. The resistance fighters reported all escape routes remained sealed, their determination undimmed by weather or fatigue. Years of oppression under cartel rule fueled their vigilance, preventing any possibility of escape. Morales felt pressure building as his world contracted to the command center's confines. The room designed as his fortress became a cage, its defensive features now serving to trap him with an approaching predator. The storm reached crescendo as James initiated his final assault, nature's fury providing cover for his approach. The skills that had made him legendary among special forces found perfect expression in these last moments. Sarah coordinated with resistance leaders, ensuring their intelligence network remained active throughout the operation. The information they gathered would prove vital in preventing any resurgence of cartel influence. The compound's remaining defenders broke as James breached the command center, their nerves shattered by weeks of psychological warfare. Those who surrendered found mercy. Those who resisted found swift elimination. Morales faced his inevitable confrontation, surrounded by the ruins of his criminal empire. The man who had ruled through fear discovered its ultimate limitation when facing an opponent who had moved beyond it. Federal authorities prepared for the operation's conclusion, their forces ready to secure the compound and process survivors. The evidence gathered would support prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions, dismantling the cartel's support network. James entered the command center's main room as lightning illuminated the scene, revealing his target amid the destruction. The hunt that had begun with his wife's kidnapping approached its final moments. Sarah maintained her position, coordinating with resistance fighters to ensure all intelligence objectives were achieved. Her actions would help guarantee the cartel's destruction extended beyond physical assets to its entire organizational structure. The storm raged outside as the confrontation reached its climax, nature providing backdrop to the final act of this operation. Paradise had been reclaimed through methodical application of skill and determination. Morales faced his nemesis across the darkened command center, each man representing opposing forces that had shaped the island's destiny. Their confrontation would determine the region's future, ending one chapter while beginning another. The compound that had symbolized cartel power became the site of its destruction, justice finally reaching those who had thought themselves beyond its grasp. The price of paradise had been paid in full measure. The hunt neared its end as predator and prey faced each other in the storm-racked facility. Their confrontation, the culmination of weeks of systematic warfare. The outcome would reshape the island's future for generations to come. James breached the command center with calculated precision, each movement the product of decades of training and combat experience. Lightning strobed through broken windows, illuminating Morales and his remaining guards in stark relief against bank after bank of dead monitors. Sarah moved through the lower levels, coordinating with resistance fighters to secure vital intelligence and ensure no evidence was destroyed in the chaos. The storm's intensity matched the violence above, water pooling in corridors and streaming down stairwells. Morales raised his hands in a gesture of surrender that fooled no one. "You've already won. The organization is finished. Let me walk away and everything I know becomes yours." The first guard made his move, diving for cover, while bringing his weapon to bear. James eliminated him with mechanical efficiency, the sound of the shot lost in a thunderclap. Two more guards broke position, their nerves shattered by their companion's swift death. Sarah encountered a group of cartel members attempting to destroy records in a basement office. The resulting confrontation proved brief but intense, her trained responses surprising men who had underestimated her capabilities. Marcus maintained tactical oversight from his position outside, coordinating with federal forces as they prepared to sweep the compound. All escape routes remain sealed. Target is contained in primary command center. Morales dropped his pretense of surrender as his last guards fell, drawing a weapon with practiced speed. His first shot went wide as lightning flashed, throwing off his aim. The second never came as James closed the distance between them. The resistance fighters reported increased activity on the compound's perimeter as lower-ranking cartel members attempted desperate escapes. Each breach attempt was contained, the cordon holding firm despite deteriorating weather conditions. Sarah secured the final intelligence cache just as fresh explosions rocked the upper levels. The compound's structural integrity was failing, stressed by battle damage and the storm's relentless assault. Time was running out for everyone inside. The confrontation between James and Morales became a close quarters battle, each man drawing on years of experience. The cartel boss proved himself more capable than his subordinates, matching his opponent's intensity, if not his skill. Federal vessels maintained position despite massive waves, their crews tracking thermal signatures through the storm. The operation had grown beyond simple revenge to become a full military-grade assault on one of the region's most powerful criminal enterprises. The compound's remaining power systems failed completely as water breached critical infrastructure. Emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving combatants dependent on muzzle flashes and lightning for illumination. Maria coordinated evacuation, routes for secured intelligence and rescued hostages, her network of resistance fighters proving invaluable in the chaos. Their knowledge of local terrain allowed them to move valuable assets despite the storm's interference. Morales fought with the desperation of a man who knew death was his only alternative to capture. His organization's collapse had destroyed any possibility of escape or negotiation, leaving nothing but this final confrontation. Sarah led her team through flooded corridors, ensuring every piece of evidence was protected from the elements. The documentation they saved would dismantle criminal enterprises across multiple countries, far beyond the immediate operation. The storm's intensity peaked as James pressed his advantage, each exchange bringing him closer to ending the conflict. Morales began to understand the true depth of his miscalculation in targeting this particular family. Federal authorities reported multiple vessels attempting to approach the island despite weather conditions. Each was intercepted and detained, preventing any possibility of extraction for the remaining cartel leadership. The resistance fighters maintained their positions even as sections of the compound began to collapse, their determination fueled by years of suffering under cartel control. Their role in the operation would remain largely unknown, but proved crucial to its success. Morales made his final attempt as part of the ceiling gave way, using the distraction to charge his opponent. The maneuver might have worked against a lesser fighter, but James had anticipated the desperate attack. Sarah completed her intelligence-gathering mission and began moving toward extraction points, knowing the compound's structural failure was accelerating. Her team's success ensured the cartel's destruction would be complete and permanent. The confrontation reached its climax attacks as support beams cracked above the command center, the storm's fury combining with battle damage to threaten total collapse. James ended the fight with clinical efficiency, decades of training culminating. In this moment, Federal forces began their approach to the compound as the storm showed signs of weakening, prepared to secure the facility and process survivors. The evidence gathered would support prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions. Maria reported all high-value targets and intelligence assets secured, resistance fighters maintaining security despite deteriorating conditions. Their operation had evolved from simple survival to become a crucial element in dismantling the cartel's power structure. The compound that had symbolized cartel authority became the site of its ultimate destruction, justice finally reaching those who had believed themselves untouchable. Paradise reclaimed itself through force of will and calculated action. Sarah reached her designated extraction point just as the first federal teams began entering the facility, her mission accomplished despite incredible odds. The intelligence she had secured would ensure the cartel's influence was permanently broken. James emerged from the command center as sections of the roof collapsed behind him, leaving the cartel's leadership eliminated or captured. The hunt that had begun with his wife's kidnapping reached its conclusion amid the storm's final fury. The resistance fighters maintained their positions until federal authorities confirmed complete control of the facility. Their role in the operation's success, ensuring the island's future would be shaped by justice rather than fear. The storm began to abate as the last pockets of resistance were eliminated, nature's fury giving way to the calm that follows conflict. Paradise had been transformed by violence, but would emerge stronger from its trials. The operation that had begun as one man's revenge evolved into a complete dismantling of criminal enterprise, its effects reaching far beyond the immediate conflict. The islands would remember this night as the moment their future changed. Sarah and James reunited amid the compound's ruins, their individual missions completed, but both understanding that their paradise would never be quite the same. The price of justice had been paid in full measure. The hunt ended as the storm cleared, leaving behind a changed landscape, both physical and political. The cartel's reign of terror concluded not with a grand battle, but with the methodical application of skill and determination. In the heart of the cartel compound, amid the ruins of what had once been an impregnable fortress, James and Sarah Reeves faced the storm's final fury. Water cascaded through broken windows and crumbling walls, turning corridors into rivers as the facility's structural integrity failed. Marcus coordinated the remaining teams from his position outside, tracking heat signatures through the chaos. Primary target is down. Secondary hostiles attempting to breach east perimeter. Federal forces moving to intercept. Sarah secured the last of her intelligence materials as ceiling supports groaned overhead. The documents she had gathered would expose corruption across multiple countries, dismantling criminal networks far beyond these islands. The resistance fighters maintained their cordon despite deteriorating conditions, their determination unbroken. By weather or fatigue, Maria's network reported multiple attempted escapes, each one contained and neutralized with growing efficiency. Morales lay where he had fallen, the legendary cartel boss, reduced to just another casualty of his own ambition. His final moments had revealed the fundamental weakness of an empire built on fear when confronted by pure skill and determination. Federal vessels began moving closer to shore as the storm showed signs of weakening, their crews prepared to secure the facility and process survivors. The operation had evolved beyond simple revenge into a full-scale assault on organized crime. The compound's remaining defenders surrendered in groups, their will to fight broken by the systematic destruction of their organization. Those who attempted resistance found swift elimination, while those who surrendered discovered mercy. Sarah led her team through flooding corridors, ensuring every piece of evidence was protected from the elements. The intelligence they had gathered would support prosecutions across multiple jurisdictions, ensuring the cartel's influence was permanently broken. James moved methodically through the facility's upper levels, eliminating the last pockets of resistance. Each engagement demonstrated the skills that had made him legendary among special forces, his training finding perfect expression in these final moments. The resistance fighters reported all escape routes remained sealed despite the weather's interference. Years years of suffering under cartel control fueled their vigilance, preventing any possibility of high-value targets slipping away in the chaos. Maria coordinated with federal authorities as they began securing the compound's perimeter, her network providing crucial intelligence about remaining threats and structural weaknesses. Their role in the operation's success would reshape the island's future. The storm's intensity began to fade as the last confrontations concluded, nature's fury giving way to the calm that follows conflict. Paradise had been transformed by violence, but would emerge stronger from its trials. Sarah reached her designated extraction point just as sections of the roof collapsed behind her, the facility's destruction accelerating as battle damage combined with weather effects. Her mission to secure vital intelligence had succeeded despite incredible odds. Federal forces moved through the compound with professional efficiency, securing areas cleared by James's team and processing captured cartel members. The evidence gathered would support prosecutions far beyond the immediate operation. The resistance fighters maintained security around critical extraction routes, ensuring no evidence or intelligence was lost in the chaos. Their knowledge of local terrain proved invaluable as flooding complicated movement through the facility. James completed his final sweep of the command center as support beams cracked overhead. The room that had symbolized cartel power now reduced to flooded ruins. The hunt that had begun with his wife's kidnapping reached its conclusion amid structural collapse. Maria reported all high-value targets either eliminated or captured, resistance fighters adapting to deteriorating conditions with practiced skill. Their operation had evolved from simple survival to become crucial in dismantling criminal enterprise. The compound that had represented cartel authority became the site of its ultimate destruction, justice finally reaching those who had believed themselves beyond its grasp. Paradise reclaimed itself through force of will and calculated action. Sarah coordinated with federal teams as they began processing secured intelligence, ensuring no crucial evidence was lost in the facility's collapse. The documentation they saved would dismantle criminal networks across multiple countries. The storm's final fury matched the operation's intensity as James emerged from the command center, leaving behind the ruins of an empire built on fear and corruption. His methodical approach had proven more powerful than any amount of criminal resources. Federal authorities established control over the facility as weather conditions improved. Their forces prepared for the complex task of processing prisoners and securing evidence. The operation's success would have implications far beyond these islands. The resistance fighters began standing down as tactical teams took over security responsibilities. Their role in the operation's success ensuring the region's future would be shaped by justice rather than fear. Maria's network had proven instrumental in dismantling cartel power. Sarah and James reunited amid the compound's destruction, both understanding that their victory had come at the cost of forever changing their paradise. The price of justice had been paid in full measure, transforming both the islands and themselves. The hunt concluded as dawn approached, leaving behind a changed landscape, both physical and political. The cartel's reign of terror ended not with a grand battle, but through the methodical application of skill and determination. Federal vessels moved to secure offshore escape routes as the storm dissipated, ensuring no targets slipped away in the aftermath. The operation that had begun as personal revenge evolved into a complete dismantling of criminal enterprise. The resistance fighters maintained their positions until authorities confirmed total control. Their actions during the operation ensuring the island's transformation would be permanent. Paradise had been reclaimed through collective action and individual courage. Sarah's secured intelligence began making its way to federal authorities, documents and evidence that would expose corruption at every level. The cartel's influence would be permanently broken, its power structure dismantled beyond recovery. James oversaw final security sweeps as emergency teams began began accessing the facility, ensuring no threats remained active amid the destruction. The skills that had made him legendary found their ultimate expression in this operation's success. The compound's collapse accelerated as dawn light revealed the full extent of damage, structures weakened by combat and weather surrendering to gravity. The physical destruction matched the completeness of the cartel's defeat. Maria coordinated with authorities to begin processing rescued hostages and captured cartel members, her network transitioning from resistance to reconstruction. Their role in the operation would remain largely unknown, but proved crucial to its success. The storm's passage left behind a transformed landscape, both literal and figurative. Paradise had endured baptism by fire and water, emerging changed but unbroken from its trials. The morning sun revealed the full extent of destruction at the compound, its walls scarred by combat and weather. Federal teams moved methodically through the ruins, processing prisoners and securing evidence under James's watchful supervision. Sarah worked with intelligence analysts, organizing the documents and data that would expose the cartel's entire network. Each piece of evidence revealed new connections, expanding the operation's impact far beyond the islands. Maria coordinated the resistance fighters' transition, their knowledge proving invaluable as authorities established control over former cartel territories. The skills developed during their underground campaign found new purpose in reconstruction. Marcus oversaw the final stages of tactical operations, ensuring no threats remained active amid the debris. The precision that had marked their assault carried through to securing their victory. The rescued hostages received medical attention and debriefing, their testimonies adding to the growing body of evidence against cartel operations. Each story reinforced the importance of what had been accomplished. James supervised security as high-ranking prisoners were transferred to federal custody, his presence alone preventing any thoughts of resistance. The captured cartel members had learned respect for their opponent through harsh experience. Sarah's intelligence gathering proved more valuable than anticipated, exposing corruption in government agencies across multiple countries. The documentation she had secured would support prosecutions at every level. The resistance fighters began sharing their knowledge of cartel infrastructure, helping authorities locate hidden assets and secure vulnerable communities. Their network evolved from survival tool to vital resource in rebuilding. Local officials arrived to assess the situation, those not implicated in corruption working to restore legitimate governance. The power vacuum left by the cartel's destruction needed immediate attention to prevent chaos. Maria organized support for families affected by the conflict, channeling the resistance movement's resources into community reconstruction. The skills that had sustained their underground campaign proved equally valuable in healing. Federal investigators processed the command center, documenting evidence of criminal enterprise spanning decades. The facility that had symbolized cartel power became a monument to its downfall. Sarah coordinated with international agencies, ensuring the intelligence she had gathered reached appropriate authorities. The cartel's influence had stretched far beyond the islands, requiring global response. The compound's structural damage forced careful extraction of remaining evidence, teams working to preserve crucial documentation before buildings collapsed completely. Each recovered item added to the case against surviving cartel members. James maintained security as journalists began arriving, their presence carefully controlled to protect ongoing operations. The story would be told, but not at the cost of compromising justice. Maria's network transitioned into a community support system, helping legitimate businesses reclaim territories once controlled by criminal enterprise. The resistance fighters found new purpose in rebuilding what corruption had destroyed. Local law enforcement underwent immediate reorganization, corrupt officers removed and replaced with vetted personnel. The process of restoring trust in institutions began with clear demonstration of change. Sarah worked with witness protection teams, ensuring trafficking victims and informants received necessary security. Their testimony would prove crucial in dismantling remaining criminal networks. The resistance fighters shared detailed maps of cartel operations, helping authorities locate and secure hidden facilities across the islands. Their knowledge which proved invaluable in preventing criminal resurgence. Federal teams discovered additional intelligence caches, each revelation expanding the scope of their investigation. The operation that began as revenge transformed into comprehensive criminal justice reform. James coordinated with military units as they established temporary control over strategic locations, preventing power vacuums from drawing new criminal elements. The island's security remained priority. Maria organized community meetings, bringing together legitimate business owners and former resistance members to plan economic recovery. The skills that had sustained their underground movement found new application. The compound's collapse concluded under controlled conditions, demolition teams ensuring no evidence was lost. The physical destruction of cartel power matched its organizational dismantling. Sarah supervised the cataloging of seized assets, ensuring proper documentation for future legal proceedings. The wealth accumulated through criminal enterprise would serve justice rather than corruption. Local communities began emerging from cartel control, residents sharing information about criminal activities with growing confidence. The atmosphere of fear lifted as evidence of permanent change accumulated. James maintained oversight as federal authorities established permanent presence, ensuring transition happened smoothly and securely. The operational precision that marked the assault carried through to reconstruction. Maria coordinated with international aid organizations, channeling support to communities most affected by cartel control. The resistance network's ability to identify genuine need proved invaluable. The evidence secured during operations revealed corruption extending to mainland power structures, triggering investigations across multiple jurisdictions. The impact of their success grew beyond initial expectations. Sarah worked with prosecution teams, organizing testimony and evidence for upcoming trials. The legal battles ahead would require the same precision as physical conflict. Local businesses began reopening under legitimate control, economic recovery spreading through communities as security improved. The island's transformation from criminal haven to lawful paradise accelerated. James supervised final sweeps of cartel properties, ensuring no assets or intelligence remained unsecured. The thoroughness that marked their operation extended to its conclusion. Maria assisted authorities in identifying and supporting families affected by cartel violence, helping communities heal while maintaining security. The resistance fighters' commitment to their people continued beyond conflict. The compound's location was designated for memorial construction, transforming symbol of corruption into reminder of justice. Future generations would understand both cost and value of freedom from criminal control. Sarah coordinated protection for key witnesses, ensuring crucial testimony remained secure for coming trials. The legal phase of their operation required same tactical precision as military action. Local government underwent restructuring under federal supervision, legitimate officials replacing corrupt leadership at every level. The process of restoring proper governance began immediately. James maintained security standards as normalcy, returned to the islands, preventing criminal elements from exploiting transition period. The skills that won their victory proved equally valuable in preserving it. Maria organized community watch programs, incorporating former resistance members into legitimate security structure. Their knowledge and commitment became assets in maintaining peace. The evidence gathered during operations continued revealing new connections, each discovery expanding scope of justice. The impact of their success grew beyond original expectations. Sarah worked with international law enforcement, sharing intelligence that would prevent criminal resurgence across multiple jurisdictions. Their victory extended far beyond island borders. Local communities embraced transformation, residents actively participating in reconstruction efforts. The atmosphere of fear gave way to determination for positive change. The resistance fighters found new purpose in supporting legitimate governance, their skills and knowledge serving community recovery. Their transition from underground movement to civic resource marked success. Federal authorities established permanent protocols for maintaining security, incorporating lessons learned during operations. The island's transformation would be protected and preserved. The operation that began with personal vengeance concluded in comprehensive justice, transforming not just individual lives, but entire communities. Paradise reclaimed itself through collective action and individual courage. Sarah and James stood on their beachfront balcony 6 months after the compound's fall, watching sunrise paint familiar waters in new colors. Their paradise had changed, transformed by events that reshaped not just the islands, but themselves. The community below bustled with legitimate commerce, local businesses thriving under honest governance. Former resistance fighters worked alongside federal agents, their knowledge helping maintain security while supporting economic recovery. Maria visited weekly, updating them on community reconstruction projects. The resistance network had evolved into a civic organization, channeling their skills into building rather than fighting. Their underground protocols found new purpose in protecting legitimate enterprises. The compound site hosted a memorial garden, its peaceful presence marking both victory and transformation. Visitors learned the story of paradise reclaimed, understanding the price and value of freedom from corruption. Sarah's gathered intelligence continued producing results, investigations spreading across multiple countries. The documentation she secured during that final night led to prosecutions at every level of criminal enterprise. James maintained security, consulting operations, but with renewed focus on community protection rather than private wealth. Their firm worked closely with legitimate businesses, ensuring criminal elements found no foothold in recovered territories. The resistance fighters integrated into local security forces, their experience strengthening legitimate law enforcement. Maria's leadership helped bridge gaps between community needs and official response, maintaining trust built during conflict. Federal authorities established permanent presence, working with local officials to prevent criminal resurgence. The lessons learned during cartel elimination shaped new protocols for maintaining island security. Sarah coordinated with international agencies, sharing insights that helped other regions combat organized crime. Their success became template for similar operations, though few matched the precision of their execution. The rescued trafficking victims found support through new community programs, many choosing to remain and help others recover. Their strength in survival inspired protection systems for vulnerable populations. James worked with military units conducting advanced training, sharing techniques that proved effective against criminal organizations. The tactical innovations developed during their operation improved future response capabilities. Maria organized regular community meetings, bringing together business owners and security forces to address concerns before problems developed. The communication networks established during resistance proved valuable in prevention. The island's economy strengthened under legitimate control, tourism returning to regions once dominated by criminal activity. Visitors found paradise enhanced by authentic community spirit rather than artificial luxury. Sarah established support systems for families affected by cartel violence, ensuring recovery included emotional healing alongside physical reconstruction. The community's transformation extended beyond visible changes to deeper renewal. The resistance fighters maintained vigilance while supporting growth, their understanding of local dynamics helping prevent criminal resurgence. Their role evolved from combat to community protection, preserving hard-won gains. James supervised security upgrades across the islands, implementing systems that balanced protection with prosperity. The skills that won their victory found permanent application in maintaining peace. Maria coordinated with international aid organizations, directing resources to communities most impacted by previous corruption. The resistance network's ability to identify genuine need improved distribution efficiency. The compound's destruction marked physical end of cartel control, but community transformation demonstrated more significant victory. Paradise reclaimed itself through changed hearts and minds, not just military action. Sarah worked with education programs, sharing sanitized versions of their experience to help future generations understand importance of community vigilance. The lessons learned would protect island freedom. The legal proceedings against captured cartel members continued, each conviction strengthening legitimate governance. The evidence gathered during operations ensured justice reached every level of criminal enterprise. James maintained relationships with federal agencies, ensuring coordinated response to potential threats. The professional networks established during their operation improved overall security infrastructure. Maria developed community watch programs, incorporating former resistance members into legitimate protection systems. Their knowledge helped identify problems before escalation required official intervention. The island's transformation attracted positive international attention, bringing investment opportunities for legitimate businesses. Economic growth under honest governance proved more sustainable than criminal prosperity. Sarah advocated for improved witness protection programs, using their experience to enhance security for those who testified against criminal organizations. The systems they developed helped dismantle other criminal networks. The resistance fighters found permanent roles in community service, their commitment to island welfare extending beyond combat operations. Their transition from warriors to guardians marked successful transformation. James worked with local law enforcement, helping develop response protocols that prevented criminal resurgence while supporting community trust. The balance between security and freedom required constant attention. Maria organized cultural events celebrating island heritage, helping communities reclaim traditions suppressed under cartel control. The restoration of legitimate culture strengthened resistance against criminal influence. The evidence secured during operations continued supporting investigations, each conviction adding to permanent change. Their success extended beyond immediate victory to lasting transformation. Sarah maintained connections with rescued trafficking victims, ensuring support systems remained effective as needs evolved. The community's commitment to protection demonstrated genuine change. The island's recovery set standards for similar operations, though few matched their unique combination of military precision and community involvement. Their success became reference for legitimate resistance against organized crime. James and Sarah watched sunset from their balcony, understanding their paradise had evolved into something stronger than before. The price of freedom had been paid, in full measure producing value beyond calculation. The community below represented living victory, genuine prosperity, replacing artificial luxury built on corruption. Paradise reclaimed itself through collective courage and individual determination, transforming not just place, but people. Their story became part of island heritage, not as legend, but living example of community potential. The transformation from criminal haven to legitimate paradise demonstrated power of committed resistance. The sunrise still painted familiar waters, but now illuminated genuine freedom rather than artificial peace. Their paradise had changed, and they had changed with it, growing stronger through shared trial and collective victory.